By the time I hit my 50s, I'd learned a few things, like how family is precious. Work can always wait. And 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles. Not everyone at risk will develop it, but I did. The painful, blistering rash disrupted my life for weeks. Don't learn about your shingles risk the hard way. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
Good morning, it's Monday, June 1, and this is the Brussels Playbook podcast. The vibe in Brussels today is impatient as EU negotiators make another attempt to strike a deal on tougher migrant returns. Also on the pod, France's presidential race is drifting towards a real nightmare scenario for Brussels, far-right Jordan Bardella versus far-left Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And the EU is dreaming of an AI chip factory, but critics reckon it might be an expensive gamble. I'm Zoya Sheftalovich, and with me today is Nick Vinocur. Hey, Nick.
Hi.
How'd you get into the office today? Did you scoot?
I did not. How did you know? No, I walked here because they've taken my precious scooters away. They barred me from using them along the main avenue I take to get here. No announcement. Scooter just goes dead halfway in. This is like, yeah.
Who did it?
You know what? I'm still investigating.
Okay.
But when I find them, they're going to be some words.
Yeah, you're gonna tell them what you think of them.
I sure will.
One of the main things we're watching today, it's migration. Because the Parliament, the Council and the Commission negotiators, they are getting back together tonight for three-way talks, trying to finalise the EU's return rules. That's the final kind of major piece of the bigger migration and asylum pact that the EU wants to roll out next month.
Yeah, and this is really where the rubber hits the road because it's sort of deciding the terms of what happens with migrants who've been denied asylum in the EU. And this is a source of major political pressure, and leaders are super keen to show voters are doing something about it.
Yeah, and this is, we've been banging on and on about the various elections happening next year, but this is a key pillar in Brussels' attempt to really claw back some of the ground that has been lost to the far right in various elections over the past few years.
Right.
But basically what the EU is trying to do is show people that it's actually doing something to assuage their concerns. And the main issue that they've honed in on, the really controversial issue, is this returns element, where people who fail in their application for asylum, who don't get refugee status, are then told to leave the EU, but they don't. Only roughly like 20 to 25% of people leave.
Yeah, exactly. So a huge majority of failed asylum seekers ends up staying in the system. And because of the Schengen no visa zone, they can sort of move freely around the EU. And this has become a major, major political sore point. And now they're looking for ways of basically facilitating sending them back to their home countries. Now, a major problem is that a lot of home countries don't want to accept migrants back. So you're stuck with a catch-22, which is why the EU is trying to come up with new and innovative solutions, which is the buzzword, for ways of sending these people outside the EU, effectively.
Yeah, that's right. And basically, the thinking is, firstly, if you set up these so-called return hubs, some people call them detention centers, some people call them return hubs. They're essentially places where you can send migrants in third countries, for instance, Albania, as we've seen Italy do. And the idea is, well, they didn't want to go to Albania, they wanted to come to the EU, and they might be more likely to leave if they're being held in Albania rather than staying in the EU. And the other kind of element of this that we should mention is also some of the places that these migrants have come from, they are not considered necessarily universally safe. So Afghanistan is one very clear one. Syria is another, where there is some dispute about whether it's safe or not to send these people back.
Absolutely. And the governments are working on that too, working on establishing safe zones, declaring that a number of these countries are safe for their returns. It's a whole kind of diplomatic telescope, this thing. But I think what's interesting in our reporting in the past few days, been speaking to diplomats, the reform is not yet completed, but they're already talking about establishing these return hubs. And the way they're doing it is a group of countries is getting together and launching discussions with candidate countries at the same time. And the strategy, they say, is reach out to 8 to 10 countries, some of them in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, 2 countries named here, about creating a deal which is going to be a quid pro quo of some type to set up return hubs there. And there's now a scramble to do this and show voters in the next few months that it's happening.
Yeah, and of course, the flip side of that is, what are you giving those governments in exchange? I mean, that can be money, it can be investments, it can be legislation that allows people to come to the EU easier, so visa liberalization.
Yeah. If you take 100 economic migrants who've been denied visas in the EU, we'll take 50 skilled workers on specific programs from your country. And we should say, I mean, these return hubs are highly controversial. NGOs warn that they can become legal black holes. Effectively, people can just stay there if they don't want to go back to their country.
Or if the country won't take them back.
A country won't take them back. It's sort of a little bit mysterious what exactly will happen to them, whether this is compatible with international law. Of course, the example of the Albanian return hub that you just mentioned has been subject to many legal challenges, and it's sort of become a symbol of how difficult it is. We've also talked about Rwanda. That was another idea from the UK. Some other countries looking to do this in Rwanda. That didn't go through. So countries are extremely wary about sort of naming, okay, we're going to do the return hub here or there. It's still very fraught.
It will most certainly be subject to legal challenge if and when these things get up and running.
Yeah, exactly. So what's at stake today is really how fast this thing starts to be applied. You got countries like France and Germany. They want the return hub provisions to apply immediately. What I'm told from EU officials is that certain things would change. This is a regulation, not a directive, so it becomes law immediately. And one thing is that migrants will have to check in with authorities in the country where they're hosted to show that they're looking for jobs and staying away from crime and so on. Another one is criminal sentences have been extended from 18 to 24 months and potentially beyond for any crime, serious crime done in the EU. And that could take effect immediately after a deal is done.
Well, super interesting, Nick. We'll be watching to see whether this deal does indeed get done tonight. We'll see what happens. Hey, Nick, did you watch the big game over the weekend?
Excuse me? No, I don't do that. Sometimes I'll pretend that I follow certain sports, like during the World Cup. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, listen, the only reason I knew there was a big game was because my neighbors were watching, and it felt like I was there. Every goal or lack thereof, I was celebrating/commiserating with them. It was the Champions League final. Paris Saint-Germain won.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah. It was a penalty shootout in the end, 4-3.
Wow, how embarrassing. I don't know that. I come from Paris, and there you go. But as per usual, there were fireworks, clashes with police, hundreds of people arrested. A great night all around.
Yeah, I'm sure that everyone enjoyed it equally. But in any case, look, things are getting pretty heated, not just on the football field, but also on the political field. Boom tish, how's that for a segue?
Strong.
Our colleague Claire Calcott has a story out this morning, and she's looking at the kind of arithmetic ahead of the French election in April 2027. And the polling that is coming out right now is sending a chill through the political mainstream in Brussels and in Paris, because it looks like it might be a two-way runoff between the far right and the far left.
I mean, this is what people call a nightmare scenario in Brussels. And you have one poll showing Bardella of the National Rally leading in the first round with 32%. That is an unbelievably high vote percentage. Edouard Philippe is the center-right candidate. He's on 17%. And Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the far-left candidate, is on 16%. And another poll places Mélenchon above Edouard Philippe. I followed France for years and years and years. I was always having to tell people in Brussels, in London, the National Rally is not going to win this election. You're not going to get this scenario. This one does feel a little different. These numbers are really kind of neck and neck, and this scenario could absolutely happen.
And the reason why the centre is concerned about the far left and far right being in that runoff, well, firstly, it's because both candidates are seen as quite problematic from the Brussels perspective. So we've got the far right National Rally, which is Eurosceptic, anti-immigrant, anti all sorts of EU values. And on the far left, you've got Mélenchon, who is quite pro-Russia, anti-support for Ukraine, and who also has some pretty extreme positions when it comes to the economy and so forth. He's had accusations of anti-Semitism, and funnily enough, he's actually also kind of Eurosceptic.
Yeah, exactly. The question is now whether the center can even get someone into the second round. So you've got Edouard Philippe. He's a former prime minister under Macron, and that link is potentially problematic for him. And then there's Gabriel Attal, also another former prime minister under Macron, much younger, an energetic person. And the game seems to be for these candidates to separate themselves from Macron's legacy and say, no, well, we disagreed completely while we were in government just 10 minutes ago, and we're going to do things very differently. You also have Raphael Glucksmann. He represents the center-left option, but a lot of these candidates are essentially circling around the same pool of voters.
They might actually end up splitting that pool. So if each of them performs reasonably well, then they are going to be taking votes from one another. And there has been conversation around, well, maybe when we get closer into the election, someone might drop out and it might become apparent who the eventual most popular candidate might be and the other person might drop out. But at the moment, they're all really competing with themselves. And that is also problematic. And we've seen some of the analysis in Claire's story. People are saying, look, if this keeps going and no one drops out until the fall, well, it might be too late at that point because the damage will have been done.
Yeah, as you say, that kind of left to center right field is now being split up into many different slices. And it's really unclear kind of who emerges as the person. As it always works in France, you have a candidate who may not be number one in the first round, but manages to rally people around them in the second round. But in order to do that, you have to make it to the second round, and it's not clear who will.
Yeah, and if you look at the polling shows that in a race between Mélenchon and Bardella, Jordan Bardella, assuming he's the one who's the candidate, because we could still see Marine Le Pen if she wins her court case and is allowed to run. But assuming it's Bardella versus Mélenchon, Bardella wins 70-30. So then you really do have a far-right president. That is a real prospect. Well, in any case, look, this is why Brussels is watching very, very closely, because it is a huge race. And listen, folks out there in the podosphere, you can actually listen to the first Playbook Paris podcast this afternoon before 6 p.m. and they're going to be talking about this in French.
Allons-y.
All right, Nick, our last story today, it's about basically Europe's favorite problem, how it can become less dependent on the rest of the world.
I mean, what else is new?
We're talking chips, but not Belgian frites.
Disappointing.
Yeah, AI microchips. So this week, the Commission is going to be unveiling its tech sovereignty package, and part of that is the CHIPS Act, which is this strategy to basically build semiconductor factories in Europe, or to be able to at least.
Yeah, and a big problem is that Europe likes using the chips much more than making them. Most of the advanced chips are currently designed in the U.S., manufactured in places like Taiwan, South Korea, making Europe super dependent on others for one of the most important technologies.
Basically, the issue is that those countries are just so far advanced, Taiwan, South Korea, they're just so advanced that basically for Europe to be able to compete to make the chips here, they would have to invest an insane amount of money. And by the time they were finished, all of those microchip factories in Taiwan and South Korea have now advanced further and further and are further in front. So it's a really big problem where Europe is quite a long way behind.
Absolutely. But then you have the issue of demand for the chips, of actually what companies are going to buy them and use them. And we lack those. Peter Hack just had an interview with the CEO of ASML. This is this crucial company that builds the machines that build the chips. And he warned that Europe could spend billions of euros subsidizing a factory only for most of the chips to be exported outside the EU. Kind of leaves us in the same place.
Yeah, exactly. So this is quite a conundrum that the European Commission is trying to resolve. The EU has already committed around about 700 million to develop next generation chips. But the idea now is to move from that research phase to actually industrial scale production. And there's a lot of skepticism about whether Europe can actually pull this off. Hey, speaking of chips, Nick, chips power AI. And I've been thinking about how people are using AI out there because actually our colleague Max Griera, he has looked into this and found that there are 2,100 European parliamentarians and their staffers and so forth who are using AI every day.
Well, I think let's keep going in that direction.
Let's do it. Well, folks, tell us how you're using it. If you're in the European Parliament or elsewhere in some other parliament and you're using AI in your work, tell us what you're doing it with.
Yeah.
Wait, tell us what you're doing with it. Oh, it's that time of day, Nick. Before we go, guess what? I got another handwritten letter.
Just let me know when I should contact the authorities. And
No, this was lovely. Herbert in Austria, thank you for sending it in. He said that he's a big fan of the pod and he actually talks about the things that we talk about with his uni classes.
it was a really nice letter. I read it and much appreciated.
Folks, if you want to write in, whether it be by literal mail or through the WhatsApp link in the show notes, please do. Hey, what about a pigeon? We've not had any pigeon mail.
What about a pigeon?
Yeah.
They're disgusting animals. Don't get me started on pigeons.
And yeah, if you do send us a pigeon, please still do go onto Spotify or Apple iTunes and give us a rate and tell your friends, give us a share. You know, this is how we get the news of this podcast far and wide.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.